Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin, and I am your moderator this evening. I'd like to thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. We're hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and to answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia's families, seniors, and economy. As I mentioned, this event is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during the event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time, and you'll be placed in queue to speak with a member of our staff. The staff member will take down your name and where you're calling from. The next time you hear your name, you'll be live on the call, and you'll be able to ask your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov. If you happen to be watching on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your question. Additionally, if you'd like to receive updates from our office via email, please press *6 on your telephone keypad at any time, and an operator will collect your email address. We may receive a lot of questions during this evening's event, so if we're not able to answer your question, please call our district office at area 703-987-2180 during normal business hours. Again, that number, 703-987-2180. Again, if you have any questions throughout the event, please press *3 on your telephone keypad or type them below the streaming player. Now, without further delay, I'd like to welcome Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. Congresswoman, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Abigail Spanberger, and I am so proud to serve as the people of Virginia's 7th District in the House of Representatives. Tonight's event is focused on hearing from you, and I look forward to hearing your questions, your concerns, your ideas related to my work for you on behalf of the people in the 7th District on Capitol Hill, and my work on behalf of Virginians. We certainly have a lot of work ahead of us, and your feedback and your comments and your questions continue to be vitally important as I work to get things done. I do want to share a couple updates on progress that we made over the weekend. This Saturday, I joined a bipartisan majority of members of the United States House of Representatives to pass a long overdue national security package. If you've joined these town halls before, you know that I have been very vocal about getting a national security package over the finish line. This package sends critical aid to our Ukrainian allies in their fight against Putin's army. This national security package will deliver humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza, the West Bank, Sudan, and other places where it is vitally important throughout the world. This package will send defensive assistance to Israel and security support to our partners in Taiwan. And certainly a couple months back, after the Senate passed their national security supplemental with 70 votes, I strongly advocated for Speaker Johnson to bring that bill forward without delay quickly so we could pass it in the House. And when I met with Ukrainian President Zelensky in Ukraine as part of a bipartisan group of lawmakers earlier this year, he was clear about the urgency of the situation on the ground in Ukraine, and we were clear about our desire and our commitment to getting the National Security Supplemental through. Certainly, as a member of the House Intelligence Committee, I know how critical this aid is, not just for global stability, but for our own national security priorities. And ultimately, while it was a few months later than I would have liked, I am ultimately pleased that serious lawmakers got together, did the job, that the Speaker was willing to bring the bills forward, and that we were able to pass the National Security Supplemental, its vital components, through the House. As far as next steps, we anticipate that the Senate will pass this legislation this week, meaning it will go to President Biden's desk to be signed into law immediately upon that passage. Thank you to everyone across the 7th District who were part of making a case for advocating for this national security supplemental to move forward. I appreciate your advocacy. And before we begin with questions, I do want to remind everyone on the line that my team is always here to support you and serve you if you or a loved one or a neighbor are having any issue with a federal agency, the VA, IRS, Social Security. Please do not hesitate to be in touch with our office. You can call us directly at 703-987-2180, or you can go to spanberger.house.gov. And with that said, I look forward to hearing your questions and I look forward to the conversation. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Reminder, folks, it's *3 on your telephone keypad to ask the question. We're going to kick the call off with James from Orange County. James, you are live with the Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
Good evening, Representative Spanberger. First of all, I want to thank you for your work in supporting Ukraine. Many years ago, I ended up watching Fire in Winter, which is a Netflix special that documented the people in Ukraine fighting for their freedom. And ever since then, I've been a staunch supporter because in the Ukrainians, I see the Americans from hundreds of years ago that were fighting against oppression. So I really appreciate everything you and your colleagues are doing to try to support them as they try to fight off the Russian insurrection. My question, I'm very concerned. I've seen numerous accounts now about the Republican U.S. Senate candidate Carrie Lake from Arizona, which is a state that I have a lot of connections to throughout my life. It really galls me at this point. She's directly quoted as saying that she said, and maybe strap on a Glock on the side of us just in case. And I began to be troubled about election security and the rising of fascism in America when I saw Donald Trump encouraging people during his primaries in 2016 to react violently against some of the attendees that may have spoken against him at some of his sessions. I was stunned that the Republicans continued to move his nomination forward at the time. And what concerns me most is, again, I'm seeing more and more of this and occasionally on either side of the fence. What I don't understand is what, if anything, is being done, why things are not being done to try to pass legislation that literally states if you are out there inciting violence as a representative in the United States legislature or in the executive branch or the Supreme Court, that should be disqualifying. I mean, that is one of the staples, one of the basics of American Constitution is the right to vote without error, and that's the basis of fascism. So could you please give me some idea of what literally is being done now to try to curb this in more than just we're encouraging our colleagues to behave themselves, because it doesn't seem to be working very well.
So, James, I want to thank you for you made a variety of comments before you ended with a question, and I want to thank you for those comments overall, because I think you speak to a variety of good points. Certainly, one of the reasons that I have been so supportive of our Ukrainian allies is because they are fighting their own war for freedom. They are on the battlefield day in and day out, and they have made extraordinary strides forward in the years since Russia first invaded. What they have asked of us is the provision of lethal aid, the provision of support. And as we have given that, and as other countries throughout the world have given that, they have been able to do just remarkable, extraordinary things on the battlefield. Their fight for democracy is a fight consistent with American values, and their fight for democracy is one that does clearly, for lack of a better word, benefit the United States, because when an authoritarian warmonger like Vladimir Putin's army is beaten back by the Ukrainian army, that is a success for all of us. And so my commitment to our Ukrainian partners is because they've demonstrated that their commitment is profound and their motivation is all-encompassing, and their desire to win is based on their desire for freedom, which is certainly something that here in the United States we should be uplifting and upholding because it's consistent with our values. And relatedly, you made the point that there have been various people in elected office or pursuing elected office who have not just called into question elections of past, but they have spoken violently. And in light of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, when a violent mob attempted to stop Congress from certifying an election, we should all be asking ourselves what type of message we are sending our kids, what type of message we are sending our neighbors, what type of message we are sending the world if we do anything other than denounce any sort of violent rhetoric. And we've seen that violent rhetoric leads to violence. That is clear, and it is something that we should all denounce. I recently came upon an email from an old friend who had been serving in Macedonia back in 2017 when their parliament building was overrun. And she said she remembered kind of being afraid of what was happening. And while she was witnessing it, while she was reporting back to our counterparts back home in the United States, this is what's happening from a diplomatic perspective. This is what it looks like. That she took the time to think and had the space to think, oh my God, well, thank God this would never happen in the United States. And from her vantage point, just a few years later in 2021, something so similar was occurring on the Capitol. Now, we went in that same evening, we certified the election, and we as a nation have endeavored to move past that day. But the reality is that it is deeply damaging to our institutions, to our freedom, to our place in the world, and to our democratic republic if we accept on any level violent, aggressive, negative rhetoric related to the outcomes of elections or related to desire and their right to cast their ballot. In terms of what we have done on Capitol Hill, as it relates to the overall certification of our electoral college votes, we have put into place some basic reforms that will make greater clarity on the day that the election is certified in the future. But the reality is that I think, I'll state this as a personal opinion, we continue to face real risk if we see any person who is a candidate or who is pursuing political office that wants to call into doubt the security of our elections and the outcome of our elections. I have been elected multiple times, and I will reflect back on my 2018 election. I won against an incumbent. I'm sure he was displeased with the results, but he did the most American thing that one can ever do, and he conceded an election publicly, directly to me, gracefully, respectfully, and he passed the torch. I'm sure along the way he's disagreed with many of my decisions, but he did the thing that is the most American thing, which is the peaceful transfer of power. And we should, regardless of when we like an outcome or dislike an outcome of an election, the most fundamental and foundational thing to our way of life and to our system of government is the peaceful transition of power. And John Adams set a good example for this when he left town to head back up to New England and toss the reins over to Jefferson. And we must continue to recognize that is what sets us apart. It's what has set us apart. And it's a tradition that has been there because people have chosen to abide the tradition of peaceful transition of power. I thank you for raising it. I thank you for the opportunity to comment on it. It needs to be part of our conversation frequently that this is what is expected of the people that we support when they are candidates, that they concede elections when they lose, that they recognize with humility and a bit of joy when they win, and that we recognize the differences of opinions should not ever imperil the basic safety and security of our country's foundations.
Thank you, Congresswoman. As a reminder, this forum is interactive and we would love to hear your questions. If you do have a question, you can press *3 on your keypad at any time to enter the call queue. Our next question comes from John. John, you are live with the Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, Representative Spanberger, and thank you for what you do for the residents of Caroline County. My name is John Danello. I'm a resident of Caroline County, and my question pertains to the Camp Lejeune Justice Act that is part of the PACT Act, which is compensating Marines who were stationed at Camp Lejeune, I think for a period of 30 years, including Vietnam era. My brother recently died of leukemia and was stationed at Camp Lejeune for a better part of a year, I think. And since then, I've been inundated by calls from lawyers wanting to represent my brother's case. It's my understanding that there's some sort of legislation in the House now to limit the attorney fees that are being charged by these firms to represent claimants regarding the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. And it's a significant matter. Most attorneys are charging 40%, and I think that the legislation limited them to 25%. Can you help me with that? Could you give me any information on that? Thank you.
Yeah. So John, I want to begin by saying I'm so sorry about the loss of your brother, and I'm grateful for his service, and I'm certainly grateful that you've brought this discussion forward. Yes, after the passage of the PACT Act, which provides which makes extraordinary steps forward in ensuring that those who have faced toxic exposures through their service, their military service, are taken care of. And for so many of our global war on terror veterans who face toxic exposures because of burn pits, that makes sure that there's a presumption of service-connected illness in the cases of certain named illnesses, depending upon their service. It means that those who were impacted potentially by exposures at Camp Lejeune, those risk factors that so many people faced, and ultimately so many people like your brother faced real health ramifications because of that service, that sacrifice is recognized. As it relates to attorney's fee, yes, there is legislation moving forward that would put real guardrails on what can be charged there. It's not in my committee of jurisdiction, so I would have to follow up with you and let you know where that is in the process, but it is a frequent topic of discussion. For anyone on the line who's listening, you should be able to apply, go through the process consistent with the PACT Act without an attorney. Now, if someone chooses to hire an attorney because that is easier, that is an individual choice, but it is not necessary. It should not be necessary. And we urge anyone who has any questions to follow up with my office. Again, you can go to spanberger.house.gov. We've got our phone numbers there. You can send us a message and we'll follow up and call you. But I have really fantastic, wonderful people in my office who are working to make sure that veterans have help as they fill out this paperwork. Either, we can answer questions about your inquiry, about your status in the system. We can connect you with Department of Veteran Services here in Virginia that provide tremendous support to veterans as well. And so, if someone is questioning what route they want to take, please be in touch. We're happy to answer questions before someone makes that choice to hire an attorney. And in many cases, that does mean that the benefits that someone receives ultimately are reduced. And you do not need an attorney to talk to our office. That's a question we've had before. Like, I represent you. I'm here to serve you, as is my team. So John, if we can follow up with you separately and do any inquiries or provide support or connect you with the right resources that are just meant there to support at no cost, again, that exists in Virginia, and certainly our office will help. We're happy to do that. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to that because we do increasingly we are hearing from veterans who in some cases think they have to hire an attorney, and that's just simply not the case. And then separately, I'll follow up with you related to the status of that particular legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next call is from Philip. Philip, you are live on the call with Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
Good evening, Representative Spanberger. First, I'd like to thank you for your communication on a weekly basis on both newsletters as to what you are accomplishing and what is before you. Second of all, I really appreciate your town halls. This is my first time calling, and one of the things I was interested in for several months, if not years, has been the government shutdown threat that constantly, shall we say, is very pervasive in every time we have a budget. And it ends up kicking it down the road, threatening all of our citizens with a government shutdown, and those subcontractors with losing pay, losing time on the job, etc. And I believe this is a real threat right now. How can we manage this to bring one's feet to the fire to resolve this issue in an expedient manner on a regular basis rather than political manipulation as it appears to be? How can we stop pay to our senators and representatives? Sorry, you're in that group.
Yeah, please.
As well. That's kind of my question, and yeah. I just needed, what can we do also? As the second part, you're an excellent representative for us, but how do we ever, if someone else is elected, how do we get rid of them? How do we recall people like that? Thank you.
So Philip, you mentioned a couple things. First, you mentioned our newsletter, so it feels like an easy place to mention. We send out a weekly newsletter. It is from the Congressional office, and it just gives a wrap-up of everything that's happened on Capitol Hill or across the district, the legislation that's been working. We usually send that out Friday. If I'm timely, when it comes out Saturday, it means that I was slowing in approving the great work that the team put together. But please sign up for that at spanberger.house.gov. The talk about shutdown threats, I am bullish on this point because I think a shutdown is wildly, terribly, horrifically irresponsible. Government shutdowns waste money. Government shutdowns hurt people. Frequently, people like to think about the federal employees, and I'm really proud to represent so many federal employees. And of course, federal employees are impacted. It changes one's ability to do one's job. When it's the will they, won't they shut the government down. But there are many government contracts that get totally disrupted. In some cases, it puts work behind. At times, training facilities in the 2019 shutdown, 2018 to 2019 shutdown, that backed up air traffic controllers and their training sequencing. And when you're already working in the case of air traffic controllers, right, they need to hire more people. They need to train more people. They've got folks retiring. We as a nation, we don't necessarily know it, but we are still impacted by what it meant that their training classes got delayed. And that kind of reverberates. And I use them as an example because their work is so vital to keeping us safe as we are propelling ourselves through the air in cylindrical tubes. Mm-hmm. And so usually that example will get people's attention. So if there's any air traffic controllers on the town hall tonight, thank you for your work. I'm in awe of it. But the threat it continues to be real. And since I've been in Congress, just about every time that we were supposed to do government appropriations or contend with issues related to the debt ceiling, we were at crisis mode. small businesses across, in particular, in Northern and Central Virginia that work directly with the federal government, restaurants, small businesses, appliance stores. When your clientele is out of work, they are not coming to buy appliances. They are not going out to dinner. Virginia is the most impacted state, economically speaking, when there are shutdowns. So from a legislative standpoint, I have worked, and Philip, I laughed when you said this. It is shocking that members of Congress do get paid when there is a government shutdown. I have led, since my first year in Congress, legislation that would prohibit members of Congress from getting paid in the case of a government shutdown. Now, of course, I am bullish on wanting to see this legislation go through because I do think it would have an impact on people's willingness to play with fire. But the kind of brass tacks reality of it is the same folks who are inclined towards potentially careening us towards government shutdown are also not going to be inclined to vote for my legislation. And so I earnestly, though I wish this weren't the case, don't see it moving forward to the House floor in any form of immediacy. In terms of what we can do, I recognize the threat. I think most of our representatives in the, at least in the northern, north of Fredericksburg, folks recognize the real threat. But there's great value, frankly, in just communicating with others about the impact of a government shutdown, what it actually means. And so just because we might provide back pay to service members or we might pay back pay to federal employees doesn't mean that for that time of government shutdown, they can't travel, they can't do their job. The last time we were careening towards a potential government shutdown, I was talking to someone who had military orders for a team to travel overseas, and the commanding officer was trying to think through whether or not they could actually put it on their own personal credit card, right? All these things that are just not how you do things, just not how you function, because they needed to get where they needed to be because they assume, all of these sorts of things. And I'm just agreeing with your example, but the reality is that we have to continue to make sure that people understand how detrimental government shutdowns are. And we're the United States of America. The idea that the government would shut down is just, it's a ludicrous reality. And for those who think it's saving money, because I've had colleagues say that, well, if you just shut down the government, we'll save X amount of days worth of government spending. That's not how it works. It is absolutely not how it works. So there's a variety of different bills, legislative efforts trying to stop government shutdowns. And I have pretty much co-sponsored the whole array of them because I believe that we should never be sort of playing with this type of fire. But, at least in the nearish term, I don't anticipate, at least not this Congress, I don't think the speaker will bring those bills for a vote. So the important thing is to make sure that, friends and family, wherever they may be, this should be an issue that people, I think it's a question of how seriously one takes the job of governance. And if someone is willing to abdicate the responsibility to fund the government to go through the appropriations process, then perhaps they should look for employment elsewhere. Because I think a foundational element of my job as a representative of the United States in the House of Representatives is to ensure the basic function of our government, which, laid out clearly in the Constitution, includes the appropriations of dollars to make that functioning process happen. So I appreciate you bringing this issue up, and I would love anybody who might be willing to continue sort of lobbying on this front to get people to recognize the lunacy of the fact that members of Congress get paid when they threaten government shutdowns, and real working people kind of across the spectrum don't. But all right, Philip, I'm going to end on this one because I'm going to just keep agreeing with you. But I think I should get to another question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Once again, please remember to press *3 if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're enjoying this update, I encourage you to press *6 on your keypad now to get signed up for the Congresswoman's newsletter. Again, that's *6 to get on our email update list. Our next call comes from Bassett. Bassett, you are live with the Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
Congresswoman Spanberger, name is Derek Bassett. I'm not one of your local constituents. I consider myself one of your national constituents. Hint, hint. Are you running for higher office? My main question is, and interest, is the Social Security Fairness Act that I think was introduced by yourself and the gentleman from Louisiana.
That's right.
Switching from the private sector as a licensed professional to the public sector was a change, of course. And once I found out, that one does not receive full benefits after they retire, I've been discussing this quite a bit with a few of my colleagues. What I'd like to know quickly is updates on this particular bill. Do you see it passing, et cetera, et cetera?
I love this question. Anybody who's joined town halls before know that I get it a lot because it's important to people across Virginia. So what Aaron was talking about is the Social Security Fairness Act, which, just for those who might not be familiar with the legislation, if someone pursues a career in public service, and people who are heavily impacted, retired federal employees, retired teachers, retired law enforcement officers, retired firefighters, it is if one pursues a career in public service and has some other type of employment as well. The Social Security system currently, there are two provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. These two provisions that were added to Social Security years after it was put in place reduce the benefits of public sector retirees, public servants, in their retirement. And so, Baron, your story is consistent with stories that I hear of retired teachers, retired police officers, retired firefighters. And when I was first running for Congress, this story, the concept of the weapon, the GPO, were brought to me. And I initially thought, clearly I'm misunderstanding something. The story that this woman is telling me about her experience with Social Security and these benefits that are reduced by hundreds of dollars a month, clearly I'm missing something. This can't be correct. It is correct. It is an enormous problem. And we have more than 300 co-sponsors. And, anybody who follows Congress, it's not common that you have that many people who co-sponsor a bill. That means sign their name to it long before it ever gets a vote. To answer your question about where we are in the process, Garrett Graves from Louisiana is our co-sponsor. He and I are working together. We've got more than 300 people who have joined with us. We have gone through every advocacy avenue to make sure that the FOP and retired federal employees and retired teachers, that the list of people impacted know about this legislation. I think we've been pretty successful, and the organizations have been pretty successful. This bill just had a hearing this past week. I think it was Wednesday, but last week was a little bit of a blur on Capitol Hill. So it had a hearing in the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that has jurisdiction. The next step, there's two next steps here. We can either go for a committee markup, which Garrett and I have been pushing for months and that we haven't been able to get, or we could try and push the bill forward through the suspension process. Because it has more than 290 co-sponsors, per the rules of the House of Representatives, we could, and there's a variety of procedural steps that you have to take in this, we could push to circumvent the traditional committee markup process and try to get it to the floor that way. Garrett and I, and we've been working together, and Garrett is a fellow Louisianan, like the Speaker of the House, so he's been doing a lot of the work trying to convince the Speaker, who is a co-sponsor of the bill, to bring the bill to the floor and to push it through potentially through the committee process, but we are still trying to figure out what is the right next step. Frankly speaking, we've been living in these kind of emergency to emergency. Now that we have gotten the national security supplemental bills through, there is a little bit more breathing room for us to, push on this and say, what's on the calendar, let's bring our bill forward. But it is vitally important for those who have not heard of this. It is a serious problem that is affecting Virginians across the Commonwealth and people across the country. We have more than enough co-sponsors in the Senate for it to pass in the Senate. And Senator Schumer, the majority leader, actually just signed on as a co-sponsor of the Senate bill, which is, of course, a positive indicator that he might be, that he would be positively inclined, ideally, to bring the bill forward. So that's the update. Nothing definitive, positive move in the right direction with the committee hearing. But with more than 300 co-sponsors, we need to bring it for a vote. It needs to pass. We need it to go to the Senate. We need to bang on the Senate to make sure they pass it and send it to the president's desk and fix this, because it is impacting retirees every single month with reduced benefits, reduced from what they should be receiving per what they paid into Social Security.
I'm sorry, Congresswoman. The next question is an online question, comes from Bob Mier, and he's asking, what are you going to do to reduce the debt?
Thank you for this question. I'm wondering if this is Bob from Louisa County. And if it is, hello. If you're another Bob who has a name similar to an old friend in Louisa County, then I send you my greetings as well. But thank you for the online question. This is an important moment to be asking that question. Of course, certainly I stand by my votes of Saturday to provide substantial aid consistent with American values and within U.S. national security interests. But the National Security Supplemental is something that carries with it a significant cost. Some of those dollars are just direct investments into the U.S. economy, because much of what we are providing is domestic U.S. made weapon systems and aid. But that investment in the U.S. economy still has dollars related specifically to money that we are, as a nation, spending. So I'll speak to some of the steps forward that we have taken to address overall issues of federal spending and efforts to reduce the overall debt. And I'll speak in one particular area, which relates to Medicare negotiation. Now, this, Bob, is not going to solve the problem and zero out the nation's debt in a day. And I don't claim that. But I think it's an important step forward in recognizing that across various areas, there are things that we can and should be doing to ensure that we are wisely spending U.S. taxpayer dollars. And so the Medicare negotiation it was part of legislation that's already signed into law that will ensure that Medicare has the ability to negotiate some of the most expensive drugs that it currently buys. And I note this because I think it's absolutely just quizzical that for years, Medicare has not had the ability to negotiate. And that means that a drug manufacturer will say, this is how much this drug costs. Doesn't matter how much you buy, how much, how little, this is what you have to spend. Now, this is not the case with the VA. The VA has the ability to say, okay, these are the drugs we want to buy from your pharmaceutical company. We're going to, buy this many over the next year. We want to negotiate, as is what is done, I would argue, in a capitalist society, in a free market society. But Medicare, by law, has been prohibited from being able to negotiate, even though Medicare is a substantial provider of healthcare and pharmacy benefits for people across the country. And so the estimates of what this will save into the future are in the billions of dollars. And so while, we will have to see, we've got the estimates of what, the actuarial tables say we will likely save as a nation because we have enacted the ability of Medicare to negotiate just a portion of some of the most expensive drugs that Medicare patients utilize. I had originally voted for legislation that would provide Medicare the ability to negotiate all drugs. Ultimately, that was a provision we couldn't get through the Senate, and we negotiated to have it be just a selection of some of the most expensive drugs. And it will take some time to see what those overall cost savings are. But I give this as an example because it doesn't address your question of how are we going to do it, as in what's the kind of final, what's the magic answer. But I think it speaks to the intent of how we can and should be looking at taking multiple steps in the right direction to address the issues of our, where we can find better efficiency in our spending and where we can be more reform-minded in how we look at the utilization of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Again, please remember to press *3 if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're enjoying the update, I encourage you to press *6 on your keypad to sign up for Congresswoman Spanberger's newsletter. I'd like to hand it over to our next caller. Ferguson, you are on the phone with Congresswoman Spanberger. Please ask your question.
Hey, good evening, Congresswoman Spanberger. I really appreciate your time. I am a small business owner, service disabled, and minority. I was looking at your last roll-up, and I saw something about a grant for skills development for workers. This is apparently a real problem. And one of the things my company does is provide a train-the-trainer scenario for sustainable aviation. And I wondered how I'd be able to get plugged into the grant from a train-the-trainer standpoint. Over.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for the question. Congratulations on the success that you must be having as a small business owner if you're kind of building out and looking at kind of next steps. So 2 answers to this question. One, from a federal perspective, I have worked on legislation to increase grants available for education. The bill that I think you'd be mentioning that I just announced was the Digital Skills for Today's Workforce Act, which will help on the job seeker side for people to access basic digital skill training that is necessary in the workforce in today's day and age. And it's been endorsed by the Virginia Chamber, the Virginia Minority Chamber, and many local chambers because they see a need for it in the workforce. But specific to you as a small business owner interested in applying for potential grants for the training that you might be doing on the ground, that's a separate process. And so I would want to have we've got a grants manager in my office who can follow up with you directly. So I believe we would have taken your information when you first called, but we'll have him get in touch directly with you, and we can look at what grants might be currently available. The bill that I introduced, that's kind of in the early phases, so that is not yet, those grant dollars are not yet available. But we can dig into what other grant programs may or may not be relevant to the work that you're doing currently. So we'll have somebody follow up with you because we want you to ultimately talk to Sean, who's our grants manager.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll have Sean follow up.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next call comes from Rudine. Rudine, you are live with the Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
Rudine, are you there?
Oh,
Rudine, this is Abigail. Are you there?
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello?
Rudine?
Oh, great. Yes,
Hi, go ahead and
yes.
ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, good evening, and thank you for your time. We are on the call this evening. You will. There are several members of Stafford Fredericksburg National Council of Negro Women, and we. This is not our first time. Well, this is our first time being on your town hall, but it won't be our last. We didn't have a question, not today, but we wanted to thank you. We wanted to thank you for supporting and elevating some of our issues that concerns women of color in our community. And those two bills were the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program.
Yes.
Thank you for getting it extended. Thank you for that. It definitely affects our community. Without it, it would not be good for us. And the second one that you've supported was our Black Maternal Health Act. So we thank you. We thank you for supporting those bills, and we look forward to being on your calls a lot more.
Thank you. Rudine, thank you so much. And to everybody from your organization, thank you so very much for joining the call. Certainly, please sign up for the newsletter. If there's particular issues of advocacy, I've heard you loud and clear on ACP. I support that program for anyone listening. It's a internet connectivity affordability program that's just been vital, and it's heavily used across Virginia's 7th district and the rest of Virginia, and frankly, the rest of the country. And it ensures that people who might have financial hurdles to having, basic access to internet connectivity, that it's affordable. Now, this is separate and apart from my efforts to make sure that broadband is everywhere across Virginia, because it is so vital to how we live our lives. And I have done a lot of work as it relates to maternal health, as it relates to health disparity, as it relates to the ongoing challenges that women face in the United States. We are already very low in our maternal health statistics, and Black women and Hispanic women in the United States have even higher negative outcomes, and we're already there's much room for improvement as a nation. So certainly, I've worked with Lauren Underwood, who's a member of Congress from Illinois, in co-sponsoring her bill, charmingly called the Momnibus. So the omnibus, but mom, it's cute. But it has really, despite the cute name, it has like serious legislation focused on supporting women, supporting pregnant women, and supporting women's health overall, with a particular understanding of health disparities that exist regionally, and also within demographic differences, and particularly the high rates of maternal mortality among Black women in the United States. So, Rudine, thank you for your thank you, and I'm happy if ever your organization has any questions about any of the legislation that I'm working on, you can always give us a call, and we can provide answers that are most specific to your organization, as you all continue to do the good work of advocating and bringing people, getting people engaged in civic issues and in policy that's important to you. So thanks for the call, and thanks for the thanks.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next call comes from Kat in Orange. Kat, you are live with the Congresswoman. Please ask your question.
This is Kat Rooser, and good evening, Congresswoman Spanberger.
Hello.
It is an absolute delight to see and hear you. I am reaching out to you. I know you, along with our two excellent United States senators, are attempting to do something with our United States postal system. I've recently been more aware because my husband is currently recovering from an unplanned hip replacement after a fall. So we have been receiving local mail. One piece of mail, our friend lives less than 2 miles from our house. And it went to it went somewhere. Our Orange post office is 1 mile from my house. But that piece of mail went to Richmond to come to my mailbox. We also received mail from Culpeper, which you may recall is 15 miles from here. But no, it went to Northern Virginia to come and be delivered to our mailbox. Why I am concerned, not for greeting cards, but so many of us are receiving encouragement from our health insurance providers to receive our medications by mail.
Yes.
Given what's going on, I'm not really crazy about this. So can you just explain to this old lady in one syllable words what the hey is going on here?
Well, Kat, it's so good to hear from you, and I hope that David's doing okay and his recovery's going well. You make a funny joke because you know I am well aware of where Culpeper is in relative to Orange. And I would say it's not for me to devise the best way to sort the mail, and if they want to send Culpeper mail to Northern Virginia to go through the PNDC process, the processing and distribution there, that's fine, or Orange to Richmond back to Orange. Maybe it doesn't make the most sense, but if that's going to be the process, I would say the part where I'm going to weigh in is that process can't take forever. And what we have seen, and I've done a lot of work, certainly you mentioned with the senators, also with my congressional colleagues, there's been major challenges at the Richmond sorting facility. And this is where I'd also like to thank the people of the U.S. Postal Service, our letter carriers, our mail handlers who do important work in delivering mail, delivering greeting cards, delivering medication, delivering tax refunds. But a lot of the choices that have been made by the higher ups, what we've seen in the Richmond area is they've changed out machinery, that they've done that at really the worst times possible, that they haven't, these are choices made at the sort of very top to not authorize additional holiday workers during the height of the holiday season. And that has just continued to plague the Postal Service with delays, with challenges over and over and over again. Now, I feel like I've become a little bit of a pen pal, ironically, with the U.S. Postal Service, as we are constantly sort of writing letters of inquiry and following up on what are they doing to make it better. And so Kat, I don't have an answer for you on when it's going to get better, but I will confirm to you that this is a major focus of mine, a major focus of both of our senators, and a major focus of many members of the Virginia delegation, because we have joined forces. And the reason it's important is because the Postal Service is vitally important. It's literally in the Constitution as an important element that the United States government is supposed to have responsibility over postal roads, right? It is foundational to our development as a country. And it is important and vital to our ability to continue with functioning sense of commerce, for seniors and veterans to get their medications at home. Certainly right now, we just had the close of tax season. Refunds should be in the mail. You don't want those delayed at all. And so I continue, if you're signed up for my newsletter, you'll see that I continue to follow up on issues related to the post office. And while I am well aware of the challenges, I will say if anybody has specific issues or specific examples, we continue to collect those because they allow me to continue speaking to the issues, right? That it's not a month ago my constituents were having challenges. It's this, a month ago they were, and it continues. So even if you hear from me that I am well aware of some of the issues that are facing the Postal Service, and I'm telling you that I am, laser focused to it and on it, please, please, please feel free to call our office and make sure that your story is logged with us, your challenge, because that helps us continue as we are working, frankly, not just with our federal counterparts, but the Commonwealth's attorney in the city of Richmond, Colette McEachin, has been heavily engaged with ensuring that the post office is functioning because it's a big issue. We are all focused on it. So again, no specific answers there. I am slightly encouraged by the attention that by the responses we've gotten, the explanations we've gotten that kind of indicate that things are moving in the right direction. But I'm going to save all of my enthusiasm and joy and celebration for the day when I get calls on a town hall that say, everything's perfect. My mail's quick. My prescriptions are not delayed. So until that happens, I am on it. So consider your challenges logged, Kat, but anybody else, please be in touch.
And Congresswoman.
Oh, I think we lost you, Kat.
We did, Congresswoman. We have time for one more question, and it comes from Kenneth Hanskin. Kenneth asks, is there any reasonable chance that Congress will pass a realistic immigration reform bill this year?
Kenneth, I'm ever the optimist. So I'm going to say there's always a chance. I don't know. Let me tell you all of my reasons for optimism. There was major movement in the Senate for an immigration reform bill, border security bill. It was negotiated between Republican Senator Lankford, Democratic Senator Murphy. It was ready to move forward. They had the votes in the Senate. It would have passed the House. The Speaker of the House said, don't bother. I'm paraphrasing. It's dead on arrival. He did say that in the House, and former President Trump also expressed that he did not want to see that bill passed. So that was a couple months ago, January, February timeframe. That bill essentially died without ever getting a vote. But the fact that they came to an agreement in and of itself, and that it would have passed the Senate, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but still this is a positive step in the right direction. And then fast forward to this weekend, after months of saying that he didn't want to move on the national security supplemental, the Speaker ultimately brought forth the national security supplemental, broken into 4 different bills and 4 different votes. And he watched them pass. And I will say, and I'm never going to compliment someone for actually just doing their job. I think that we should have higher expectations than that. But within the realm of politics, he did make the choice, which is a departure from his predecessors, to rely on Democratic votes in Rules Committee and to know full well that the bills were going to pass with a majority of Democrats and not in every case a majority of his own party Republicans. And there is a rule on the Republican side of the aisle that they will only bring bills that will pass with the majority of the majority. And so I note those 2 things because the choices that he made this weekend demonstrated that he was willing to do what was right to govern for an emergency situation. Certainly the Ukraine aid, the timeliest of the emergency situation, but the humanitarian aid is of an emergency situation, as is longer term need, but are supplemental for Israel and for Taiwan. And so this is why I maintain my level of optimism that it is possible, because be it the bill that would have passed the Senate, maybe the speaker decides to bring it up in the House or something similar. We pass that and it has a path in the Senate. It's possible. There's also another bipartisan bill that I'm a co-sponsor of called the Dignity Act. It's a bill that was put forth in the House by Veronica Escobar. She's a representative Democrat from Texas. Maria Salazar, she is a Republican from Florida. They've been working on this bill for years. It is bipartisan immigration reform, substantial changes to the asylum process, improvements and quickening in terms of how someone processes through. It adds more, some similarities with what was originating in the Senate. And this bill's bipartisan originating in the House. So be it the effort that was initiated on the Senate side, be it this House bill, a month ago I would have said I don't think there's any chance, but now I'm in a very optimistic mood. I'm always in an optimistic mood, but particularly with some empirical evidence that would demonstrate that there might be cause for optimism. And so, I mean, it fundamentally comes down to whether or not the speaker wants to again sort of rise to the moment, because there is a drastic need. And I'm sure you're aware of it, which is why you asked the question. But that drastic need is people want to come to the United States. Our asylum process is overstretched. Our border is overstressed. The personnel along our border and tasked with keeping our border safe and immigrants safe, they are overstressed. They are underfunded. They are understaffed. And it is a major challenge. It is a crisis, and consistent with the values of a country that is literally a country of immigrants. We should want our process to be orderly. We should want our process to make sense. We should want people to be safe if and when they pursue a dream of trying to immigrate to the United States because they want to work there and they want to do it legally, or because they want to flee to the United States because it is, the shining city on the hill. And so I think that I'll continue to make a case for the fact that we are in, an urgent moment in time. We have been for quite some time. I don't argue that point. But perhaps given that the Speaker of the House has recently demonstrated a willingness to respond to the urgency of particular issues. And we've got two different examples, be it the Dignity Act or what was negotiated in the Senate, two different examples of immigration reform and border security improvements that would be able to garner bipartisan support. Given those two bills and recent actions by the Speaker, I'm not betting it is wholly likely, but it's only April. There is certainly time for us to do something of great value and legislatively important such as that. So, Kenneth, I thank you for asking the question. I'm in constant contact with Maria and Veronica about their bill as we continue to try and garner additional support and make sure that there's kind of a churn on the ground within the House of Representatives of, that hardy group of people who want to govern, which, thankfully we were able to demonstrate over the weekend is a very large group of people. So thank you for the question. And with that, I think I'll jump ahead of Robin because I think we are out of time. Robin, are we out of time?
We are out of time, then. But
all right.
Well, let me thoughts about this evening's town hall.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank everyone for the questions. We had a nice array of questions. If we didn't get to your question, please, we will follow up. If you have additional questions that arose out of this discussion, please be in touch with the office. If you want or need support with the federal agency, please go to spanberger.house.gov. Please call our district office or our DC office. If you were a veteran, if you heard reference to issues that might be impacting you, and we can provide support, please be in touch. And I just want to thank everyone for joining me on this lovely, lovely Monday evening. Thank you for the honor of serving you. Thank you for engaging. And I think based on the questions, it's clear that we have a vibrant community. I didn't have too many people who disagreed with me this evening, which, next time, I think it's important when we hear the agreement and the disagreement. So maybe it's just early in the week for the disagreements to start, or maybe the weekend of passing legislation in such a bipartisan manner put everybody in a bit of a super bipartisan mood. But I think it's important to have these conversations. It's important for me to remain accountable, to try and explain what it is that I'm doing, either in town halls or with the newsletter. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for spending your time with me. Our government is of, by, and for the people. And by doing things, even little things like participating in a town hall, everyone on the call is taking ownership over this great American experiment. And just reflecting back to the first question, there's nothing more important than the very foundation of our government, of our system of government, of our belief in our shared commitment to making it stronger. That doesn't mean we have to agree all the time, but it means that we need to make it work. Throughout history, there's been extraordinary people who have disagreed, but committed to the American ideal of our democratic republic. And, it's the little things. It's voting, it's engaging as on town halls, or sending with technology. Now you can send an email about the things that are important. And so I continue to welcome you all to do that. And again, I just thank you for the opportunity to serve you in Congress. And I'm so appreciative that this is how you all chose to spend a Monday night. So I look forward to the next one. And everyone stay safe. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. If we weren't able to get to your question this evening, you can call our district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours, or go to spanberger.house.gov. Thanks again, everyone. Stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night.